Hey, it's Gil. Before we get into this episode, I want to give a trigger warning that this interview includes frank discussions of suicide, suicidal ideation, and self-harm. So please, only proceed if you feel you can handle the conversation. All right, let's do this.
His name is Gil, and he's mentally ill. That's why the name of the show is Mentally Ill.
In this show, I go deep with content creators on their struggles with mental health. This season of Mentally Gill, we're focusing on anxiety and burnout. This week, writer and actor Anna Akana enters the chat. We talk about comedy and grief and how both impacted each other, especially after her little sister's tragic suicide.
Hi, I'm Anna Akana. I'm a writer, actor, and content creator.
I've known Anna for years. She is a capital C creator. She writes, she directs, she produces, she acts, she sings. Can she dance? I'm actually not sure, but she does do her own stunts and could beat me up with her pinky. Now, what kind of upbringing produces such a child?
So I grew up all over the world. My father was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. My mother was a homemaker for the first 17 years of my life. And we would move about every 2 years to either a completely new state or a new country. So by the time I was 6, I'd already lived in 13 states since my father was an aerospace engineer and in demand.
What kind of kid were you?
I still am the oldest. So I had this, every expectation put on me from Asian parents. I was incredibly responsible, incredibly a goody two-shoes, wanting to please, very eager to please, and just kind of was very much a rule follower.
Were you a creative kid or athletic?
I was a very creative kid. My parents actually were very supportive of my artistic endeavors. So I used to draw on the walls, and instead of yelling at me about that, they would actually tell me to draw a mural in every room. So I grew up, and every time we moved, they would just paint over it, but they would allow me to really explore my love of illustration and painting.
Did you ever feel like, even if you didn't have a name for it, but did you feel anxiety at all growing up?
Looking back on it now, I can see that a lot of my thoughts were anxiety-ridden and obsessive-compulsive. I used to have really dark, intrusive thoughts that something terrible was going to happen to my family, and that if I thought through every scenario that could go wrong, that wouldn't happen. My logic was, if I imagine this, it won't happen because real life doesn't happen that way. So very often I would envision my family dying in a car crash or an earthquake happening or a fire, to sort of mentally forbid it from happening.
How generous of you to overanalyze.
I'm here for the fam.
Now we're getting to the part I warned about that may be triggering for some. Growing up in a home where home itself is constantly changing due to her father's military career and already being plagued with deep fears of death, Anna's anxiety grew darker after her younger sister's abrupt suicide.
So I am most predominantly known for my mental health advocacy, which got started because in my youth, when I was 17, my younger sister, who was 13 at the time, committed suicide. It was in 2007, so it was at sort of the precipice of this huge wave of adolescent children committing suicide. It was right before, all those horrific cases of people drinking bleach or cutting themselves or self-harming to the point of suicide. And she was bullied in school, which is part of her reason for doing it. And I was the last person to see her alive. My last words to her were, "I hate you." And given the chance to apologize, I was going out of the house right after our fight. I remember looking at her door and thinking oh, I should go in and say sorry. And I was like, whatever, I'll talk to her later.
Anna's sister had hung herself in her closet. She was just 13 years old. It was a devastating loss for her family and friends.
Going through such a primal family member's death, I think particularly as a young woman, at 17 years old, it completely, it's a before and after. It's the catalyst of my life's before and after, and my whole reason for being where I am today. I very often say my sister's suicide is the worst and the best thing that happened to me, because I really tried to give it meaning, to make it a driving purpose of my life, and to make something good out of this terrible hand. But it's been hard. I mean, I've had episodes of depression since then. I like went on like a 2-year drug binge and like didn't go to college and just kind of like work this dead end pizza job and get high every day, whether on LSD or, you know, smoking weed 5 million times a day. But it was really, really difficult to make sense of this reckoning that we all really do die, and is there no purpose at all to it? What impacted me the most was when fucking people would say, everything happens for a reason. It was just like, fuck off. Like, what reason is there for like a young girl to be bullied and kill herself? Like, I fucking hate when people say everything happens for a reason. It's so insulting. It's so awful. But what I eventually came around to was like, I have to give myself a reason for this. I have to give myself a purpose from this. Otherwise, I'm just totally fucked. And so I've struggled with depression ever since. Asian American women are the second highest demographic to commit suicide within the United States, predominantly college-age women. And if you have someone in your family who has committed suicide, you're 50% more likely to commit suicide. Women have like a much higher rate as well. So I've been battling with, you know, all these statistics and sort of like dark prophesizing that I'm maybe supposed to die this way too, which my therapist assures me is very normal for people who lose someone like this. But it was just awful. It was like fucking awful to go through. And I cannot emphasize enough. Even in a meeting earlier today, some guy was colloquially using the term killing myself. Like he was like, oh man, like, yeah, that happened and it made me want to kill myself. And I don't, you know, I don't want to be a precious little snowflake, but in the sense of, would I ever want to make someone think about someone they love, like hanging in a closet just because I want to use a certain set of words? No. Like, I do think there's something to be said for part of my advocacy is starting to take that kind of language out of the jargon and the verbiage we use in everyday life. Like even the gesture that people use where they put, you know, their finger guns up to their head and they pretend to blow their head away. I had done that for years without realizing how ingrained in our society and our culture it is to use this kind of conversational gesture. Actually, when I first started talking to people who were in my life about the use of suicidal language colloquially, that was really nerve-wracking when I first started doing it, because it felt like asking for too much or asking for people to change themselves or tiptoe around me. But, you know, I've had to even some of my best friends, I'll be like, hey, like just a heads up, like when you say, oh, if I had to sit in traffic for 1 more hour, I was going to kill myself. It's like, just so you know, like that just reminds me of my sister. And like, when I hear that language, I literally imagine her hanging in a closet next to her toy chest by a red scarf. And they're like, oh my God. They're like, oh my, like, and so when they hear that, I think, you know, it feels like being too much. It felt awful. It felt like me imposing myself onto, you know, people's free speech. But then I think once I started telling that to people, like everyone reacted in such a good way in the sense of like, thank you for letting me know that. Obviously that makes sense. I will never use that language again. If I ever do, I'm sorry. Please call me out on it because I really want to take that out of my vocabulary. And it's been, I mean, so far, like almost everyone I know who has been in my life, I try to ask that of them of like, you know, it's really jarring for me. It could, and if I'm in the wrong headspace, it can ruin my entire day. It could like really throw me off the whole day. But that was really, really hard. And I like built it up for a long time. And like, even some people I was really resentful of for a long time, even though I never communicated that need to them. So I think once I started doing it, I was like, oh, of course people fucking understand, because most people are like kind and compassionate and they get it. Like no one's going to be like, fuck you, Anna. Like, I still want to be able to talk about killing myself. So it turned out to be fine.
Well, the problem is that I experience suicidal ideation. So sometimes when I say I want to kill myself, I sort of mean it. And other times I'm using it colloquially and my friends and family are like, dude, pick one. Like,
yeah. Well, I also understand, like, I don't mind it when people are using it in the sense of like, they're being serious, but they're kind of joking as a coping mechanism. I think that's okay. I think it's like the thoughtlessness of when it's just integrated into language that I don't like. You know what I mean? Like when it's used as an exaggeration, I feel really upset. But I mean, I get it. Like, and obviously if I knew, like if you're a friend who has suicidal ideation, like I will joke that way with you. You know what I mean? Because that is something we have in common that we're joking about to take power and ownership over. So when that intent is there, like I honestly don't mind it.
Okay, let's run down a list of different ways to mime killing yourself, because I am guilty as charged of doing this. See what I did there? There's the gun to the head and pulling the trigger, putting the gun in your mouth and then using your other hand to mimic your brain exiting your skull. There's slitting your own throat, or for the old-timers, pulling on a noose while you tilt your head to the side and let your tongue hang out. The only difference with me, I guess, is that I'm kind of serious about it. Is that TMI? It's not just people's behavior that Anna says she is disappointed in, but also the media's depiction of suicide.
In terms of my anxiety as well, like there's so much suicide portrayed in media that, you know, I'll be watching like Pirates of the Caribbean, and then all of a sudden all these like the opening scene is like pirates hanging from a noose. And I'm like, well, I have one defining moment of my life that's related to suicide and is that specific. So here we go, like just thinking about that now. Which not to say, I'm also not an advocate of like, let's completely take out suicide or hangings or anything.
Right, it's part of the
media.
human experience.
Absolutely. And we should portray it. I'm just an advocate for responsible portrayal or going in and knowing what I'm seeing. I was not expecting that in a Disney movie, to say the least, you know? So I'm all about like sensitive and responsible portrayal. Like, for example, 13 Reasons Why on Netflix. After that show came out, huge wave of suicide in kids. Huge wave. Like discernible uptick. And they were basically a how-to kill yourself guide.
Yes.
You know, showing a step-by-step process in the episodes, which is incredibly irresponsible. Therapists everywhere like signed a big petition of like, you have to take this down. And there are ways to responsibly portray it. There are ways to allude to it. There are ways to sort of imply that this is about to happen without necessarily giving people who are on the precipice of, you know, their mental frayed health, the sort of push. Yeah, the method or the push, because it does, studies do show that people who are really at a place where they're considering it, if they see it, it's almost more relatable, more accessible, more realistic to them, sort of more tangible. And so I think we have to keep in mind, like, our art is not necessarily worth anyone's life. Our creative expression should not be something that pushes someone over the edge.
I got really messed up from A Star is Born. I don't know if you saw it. There was like an element of it to me that felt like they were sort of glorifying his suicide. Yeah. And it fucked me up for like weeks.
That's
I'm sorry.
Thing, right?
I'm sorry that your sister was suffering so much.
Thank you.
With something as tragic as the death of her sister, it was hard for Anna to find a reason to laugh, until she found it viewing Margaret Cho's stand-up comedy for the first time. She then realized it was time for her to give others a reason to laugh too.
So like when my sister died when I was 17, and then when I was 19, I saw Margaret Cho perform at a show. And it was when I got out, I realized, oh, that's the first time I've laughed in 2 years. And it's the first time in 2 years for like an hour that I forgot she was dead. Not like forgot, but it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. You know, it wasn't all consuming, which it had been. And up until that point, it's like something that was just always like here at the forefront of everything I was thinking of. And when I saw Margaret perform, I was like, what a beautiful gift this woman has given me. To forget for a moment my troubles, to laugh again for the first time. I wanted to give that to someone else and pass it on. So I started doing stand-up comedy almost every day. I would drive from Temecula to Los Angeles and do open mics and, you know, do the whole laundromat and coffee shops deal.
If I can jog your memory about something in your book, you would sign up for open mics. And then you would leave halfway through and drive 150 miles back.
I would sign up for open mics, and then I would be so anxious that I would leave in the middle of the open mic, like maybe right before I was going to be called up, and I would just drive the like 150 miles home or whatever it was.
Wow, yeah, I've done that with parties.
You just walk in and walk out.
I will get all the way to the door and then just be like, nope. Or,
wow.
Or I will use the lack of available parking as an excuse. Like, I drove around for 10 minutes. I couldn't find parking. I went home.
Wow. Oh, I've never done that. I'm always like, I drove all the way freaking here. I'm going to go to the damn party and eat some crackers.
Eat some crackers.
But actually, the better I got, the worse my anxiety got. And I would cancel on shows last minute, or I would be a no-show. Like, as I started booking real shows, I would start to self-sabotage. And my anxiety before going on stage would be so bad. Like, I can barely do 10 push-ups, but my anxiety during stand-up was so bad. I would probably knock out like 30 to 50, like right before a show, because my heart was just going so insane. And eventually I tried doing everything. I tried like hypnotherapy. I tried like going to like very specific people who work with stage fright and anxiety. And it was bizarre because I was like, when I was terrible at stand-up, I was having a grand old time, no fear, super excited to get up. And it was like the moment I started getting good and refining my act is when all of that kicked up for me. And of course, like going through lots of talk therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, I realized it was self-sabotage. And I didn't feel like I deserved to be successful or happy, which is why that was sort of manifesting for me. But it was so physically visceral. It was just hard to deal with. Like if I knew I had a show on Friday, if it was Monday, every moment was excruciating, dreading the show.
Let's go to an ad break, 'cause making this show ain't free.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Tell me if this sounds familiar. One time I had to confront a friend about a difficult situation, and I didn't know how to go about it. It made me really upset. At the time, I wished there was some user manual I could have pulled out of my back pocket, turned to page 394, and known exactly what to do. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual, so when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck, or anxious or depressed, or any combination of those things. This is why therapy is so great, because therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Therapy is a critical part of my life, and the number one benefit I've gotten from it is to be less reactive and more thoughtful in how I engage with the world. I always leave a session feeling empowered with coping skills and new frameworks on which to base decisions. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Gil. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gil.
That was the ad now, back to our show.
One of the things I like to ask my guests is, how do they talk to themselves? And I was wondering if we could sort of break that up from, like, when you started to get better at stand-up, like, but then anxiety crept in, like, what kinds of things were you saying to yourself? What was going through your head at that time?
When I was getting better at stand-up, the sort of self-talk went from, wow, I really enjoy this. This is giving me purpose. I love this, to, oh no, like you're just opening up yourself to criticism. People aren't going to like you. This is bad. Why are you doing this? You're not good at this. I think the self-talk really became defeatist, and like I would never be able to physically overcome the stage fright enough to be good at stand-up. That's what I told myself anyway, even as I was becoming a stronger writer and my jokes were hitting, and like all my really bad shows were sort of at the beginning of my career. But I remember at one point I toured with a bunch of Asian comedians, and we had a show. It was a predominantly Black audience. And I did my whole set, which was like 10, 12 minutes at the time. Not a single laugh from the audience. Just absolutely, like, just dead in the face.
Absolute bomb.
Yeah, absolute bomb. Crickets. And I got off stage, and the veteran comedian was like, wow, Anna. He was like, they were not having it, but you didn't let up. Your energy was exactly the same the whole show. Like, you did not let that bomb discourage you. And at the time, like, I don't think he just realized I was too stupid to like really tune into that. I was just trying to do my act and get off stage.
Can you tell me about when the sort of light clicked on for your YouTube career, and if anxiety ever played a role in that?
I actually started doing YouTube because my stand-up anxiety was so bad.
Hey there, don't you hate it when you feel depressed?
I started creating YouTube content because I could be home alone. I wouldn't have to see anyone. I could write, direct, act, shoot, edit in complete isolation. And I really found that I loved it. I've always loved filmmaking. I've always wanted to be an actor, but just was incredibly shy and had no self-esteem as a younger person. But when I started doing YouTube, I really started to find my groove. I was very inspired by people like Ryan Higa and Natalie Tran and, Happy Slip, and found that I loved the idea of doing a monologue to camera that had cutaways and something that was like humorous, but also touching on mental health that could give people like a nice takeaway. And I think I was doing it for maybe like 4 or 5 years till I had something go viral on Upworthy.
Okay.
It was a video that I had, it was like one of my first ideas, but I never did it because I was like, this is too stupid. I'm not going to do it. And then one day I just had no ideas, had to create my weekly video, and ended up making this parody called How to Put on Your Face.
So I have had a surprising amount of requests since I first started this internet thing to go over my everyday makeup routine.
Where I was doing my makeup, but I was actually saying like, oh, when you put your eyeshadow on.
Dabble your eyes with optimism. It's all about your perspective on the world, but you want to be careful and not put too much optimism, or else you'll just be left with disappointment via your high expectations.
So when you put your lipstick on, you're speaking words that are intentional and purposeful. So just like a fun little parody like that, which ended up being my first viral video. It gained me a large audience, much larger one than I had at the time, and allowed me to collaborate with people like Wong Fu and Blogilates, and enabled me to sort of like widen out my community online.
Now, I like to also just give myself a little bit of a cat eye. That way everyone I meet knows that I own 4 cats and I love cats, and if you have a cat, we are automatic best friends.
Could you talk a little bit briefly about two things? One, like some of the physical symptoms. I think in your book you said you had like hair coming out. Can you talk about some of the physical symptoms? And then also, I'm curious to know, like, what did you talk about in your stand-up versus what were some of the things that you could talk about in YouTube?
Yeah, the physical manifestations of my anxiety during stand-up were really intense. I started to have hair fall out because I was so stressed out. I would like run my hands through my hair all the time. Not to be gross, but I had a ton of gastrointestinal issues and dysentery. Like it just fucked my stomach up. I couldn't eat. Like if I knew I had a show that day, I was like, I can't eat or I'm going to throw up. And it was like a whole big rule that I had. Like I would never eat before a performance. Like if I knew I had an evening show, I'd stop eating at lunch. I started to shake really uncontrollably a lot of the time. My heart would race. I would occasionally get migraines. It was just very physically visceral. And they say like, public speaking is the #1 fear in America. And so not only is it public speaking, but it's also like trying to make people laugh on average once a minute. So it was just terrifying. And when I first started out, my jokes were all, pretty like, I think this was 2009. They were all pretty racist and pretty stupid. I think like one of the first jokes I ever had was comparing watching a guy's erection for the first time to like seeing Godzilla, which was honestly way too generous of like a teenage boy.
Also, way too generous for a 38-year-old Jewish man.
But they were all pretty like on the surface, superficial. Like, I had this joke that like I always wanted to be a performer who got up on stage and made people laugh. And my mom was like, oh my God, you want to be a stripper? So it was like shit like that. As I started, I think it was like 7 years in, I was like, maybe I should start talking about what I talk about in my YouTube videos, which is stuff that's really important to me, like mental health, depression, suicide. And I finally, after 7 years, was able to actually laugh at a suicide joke. I couldn't find them funny at all for like almost a decade. And I was like, I think what would really be empowering to me right now is, could I make my sister's suicide into part of my act? Could I find the balance between making it funny, allowing people to laugh at it, but still doing it, justice and service? And I tried for, I think like 5-6 years after that to completely talk about the dark things in my life and make them funny, like my abortion, my sister's suicide, the sort of the rift between me and my parents because of that and the fallout that I had with my family. And it was really freeing. It was like taking a sharp memory out and turning it over and over in your hands until the sharp edges were like kind of smooth. Like it was taking back the power from this really harrowing event. And I think once I was able to successfully do a set about it, it was so great to me. And don't get me wrong, I think it's hard because a lot of my audience back in those days were people from YouTube, and they're expecting a different kind of comedian. And I'm a really dark person. I love dark humor. I love macabre humor. And I have that on my channel sometimes, but I think the presentation is so bright and sunny, and we intentionally make the videos look very like poppy and editorial, that I think people were like really taken aback at first to hear really dark fucking jokes come out of me. So it took a long time to make it funny because people were upset. I would have people come up to me after the show, like whether they were fans or not, and they would be like, I can't believe you would joke about something like that. I mean, this is like even before, mental health was really in the zeitgeist. This is before Instagram therapy. So it was
right, Instagram therapy.
Yeah, it was still like quite a taboo to talk about this stuff, and I felt like I probably was taking that set around for like 3 years before I like cracked the segments about her suicide, and found a way in to allow people to like laugh at that event with me, because a lot of people felt like they were laughing at her, and it's it's hard. You have to like do show after show after fucking show and tweak your language and find the perfect way in to disarm the audience and allow them to laugh at something that harrowing. But I think I finally did after 3 years. And it was a really empowering, awesome time. I do know there was this guy named Josh who lost his older brother to suicide. I forget his last name. He was a comedian. And his set was all about losing his older brother to suicide and how he's always wanted to be an only child and how that was playing out for him. And I cried laughing at that set because I was like, this is the most uniquely relatable thing to me. And I remember being like, wow, the balls on this guy. And, half of the crowd did not like this set. They were very upset with these jokes. But I probably looked insane because I was howling with laughter. So people were all like, who the fuck is this insensitive bitch? And I'm like, you don't get it. It's really relatable. But I remember seeing him and like really loving it. I also, Jake Wiseman, who's a friend of mine, we did like a roast of each other. It was like a comedian roast. And I'll never forget when he roasted me, he said, Anna, I can't believe your sister killed herself before she'd ever seen a YouTube video of yours. And I started laughing so hard, I like pissed myself. And all of his jokes were like, so we roasted each other. Jake is also very open that he's like he's been very suicidal. He's like got insane manic depression. And so both of our roasts of each other were all around suicide. I was like, well, at least my sister was 13. She had more balls than you. You keep threatening to do this and you don't. It was the most glorious time of my, I think, comedic life of like, I finally got to a place where I was like, none of this hurts me anymore. I'm able to really look at it, to laugh about it. And it felt like it took 10 years, but I felt like I'd finally transformed all of that pain into something useful and good. And I'll never forget that roast. It was like I've never laughed so hard in my life.
Anna would take a hiatus from performing comedy on stage as her anxiety became too much. She's found a different outlet in recent years that has brought her back into the spotlight: music. And not as a cover band called the Gillers, as per my suggestion.
I perform stand-up on occasion still, very, very rarely, but I think I'm going to go back to it probably in my 40s once I have just more to say. But I do perform music now because I still love live performing. There's nothing as visceral as the reaction you get in the moment. But even when I was doing stand-up, music always seemed more vulnerable and more scary to me, because with stand-up, immediately people are laughing or they're not. Immediately how you're doing. With music, it felt like no one's ever really saying anything. You have to be able to pick up on the energy of a room. And that means like being able to be attuned to like a collective of people while you're also trying to be vulnerable. It seemed infinitely more challenging to me because in stand-up, all you have to do is address what's going on in the moment and you're diffusing tension. In music, you have to be doing a really great freaking job in order for people to enjoy it.
How would you describe your anxiety these days?
My anxiety has really morphed throughout the years. I think it started more on the catastrophizing and intrusive thoughts sort of spectrum. And as I've gotten older, it's really manifested predominantly physically. I mean, obviously, there's a mental component as well, where you feel like your mind's racing or that your body's being flooded with cortisol, you're shaky, you're anxious. But I've also found that my body just feels anxious, even when I don't have a reason to be, and I've done all my regulating activities. My heart rate in particular, I bought this like new Aura ring that tracks my heart rate, and I've been really able to see, oh, like my anxiety is completely manifesting as like irregular heart rate, really high heart rate, an inability to have like a good recovery index or stay in deep sleep or REM sleep. So right now it's just been really affecting my body and my ability to regulate my own levels.
Do you have like anxious spaces?
No, I don't think I have like negative association. Like even cemeteries I enjoy because it's a reminder that like, oh, when I die, maybe I'll get to see my sister again. So it's like death isn't as, I mean, I don't want to die, but death is not as scary to me as I think most people.
Anna's journey with anxiety has been marked with hurdles that have come her way as she's built her career and her life with cats. Achoo! Whew! Sorry, allergies. So she's had to learn different ways of coping tailored to these different triggers. She spoke to me about coping mechanisms, healthy or not, how COVID helped narrow down her social circle, and her on and now off relationship with medication.
So I initially decided to go on meds because I had my first bout of sort of not even suicidal ideation. I was like ready to kill myself. I had gone through a really intense depressive episode. It was like the worst personal year of my life and the best professional year of my life. And that sort of dichotomy of those two things together it just also made me feel worse because I was like, how can you be depressed when you're going through so many great things professionally? I talked to my therapist at the time and he really recommended I get on medication just to lift the floor of my depression. And I did. And I really appreciate it for what it did for me at the time. It really opened my eyes to how much my brain was at the whim of my emotions. Like finally feeling a sort of equilibrium and a sort of centeredness. And instead of having, volatile, wild mood swings, I was like, oh, is this what normal people feel like all the time, which is sort of like the absence of chaos. I even had like a fan scream at me after a show because I think I was supposed to do an hour and I maybe did like 20 minutes because some shit had come up. And I felt like I wanted to cry, but the meds were kind of like, no, like everyone else enjoyed the show. We don't need to cry because of this one person. And I was like, really? But like, I want to cry. Like this would normally make me cry and like be like ruin my whole night. And the meds were like, no, like honestly, we're okay. We don't need to waste time with that. So I ended up going off of them after my sort of depressive episode had lifted because I was experiencing really intense like physical side effects, like really intense fatigue and a lack of energy and creativity. But that said, it's been great to know that they're there anytime I go through a suicidal sort of inclination. And if my depression gets bad enough, that they're a safety net that I can go on to prevent me from doing something permanent.
What sorts of things, and like, these episodes, like sometimes they get dark, sometimes they get light. I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that you overanalyze or overthink?
Oh man, I overanalyze everything. I overthink everything, or I have. I'm working my way out of it. But I overthink and overanalyze social situations a lot, especially like, I don't know if you've gone through a great pandemic friendship reckoning, but I think I lost probably half my friend group in the pandemic and really, really realized the kind of people I was associating with who I kind of didn't want to be associating with anymore. Things that it was easy to overlook in a time and place when we were just so busy and rushing from thing to thing and you had a larger friend circle. And so after I went through my like great culling of little divorces, now I find myself really overthinking and overanalyzing those friendships, the way they ended, the conversations we had, the emails, things I wish I had said. Like I do a lot of hypothetical conversation playing out in my head. Like it's my way to feel in control and to feel like oh, I can have power over a situation if I'm prepared for every scenario. So a lot of my overthinking and stuff is relational.
What are some of your anxiety triggers these days?
My main anxiety trigger is feeling overwhelmed. When I feel professionally overwhelmed, it just cues the stress, the cortisol, everything, you know? Like you have those days where you like, I can't even look at the list. The list is so long of what I have to do. I also used to have a lot of attachment anxiety. So if I was dating someone, you know, every moment of the day, it would be like, oh my God, did they text me? Did they text back? And the like core feeling of, you know, everyone leaves, everyone abandons you would be so insanely activated.
Do you have anxiety dreams?
I have so many anxiety dreams. Most of them revolve around my cats. I have so many stress dreams about them, especially right now with, you know, doing palliative care, end of life care for Lily. All my dreams are about death and about death lurking around somewhere. I have a lot of anxiety dreams where when I'm in like a good, healthy relationship where I'm like cheating on my partner, even though I have no interest in doing that, like I feel like it's my brain trying to work out like, well, maybe we should just do a little self-sabotage.
You sounded like Maria Bamford for a second.
Oh, what an honor. I feel like my dreams very often manifest like all my brain laundry that I'm going through.
Could you talk a little bit briefly just about these days? Like, how do you cope with your anxiety? What works for you?
I think what works for me in managing anxiety is all the annoying, fucking, boring day-to-day things we know we need to be regulated. Good sleep, exercise, eating well, meditation, therapy. Like, it makes me roll my eyes, but it is true. Like, anytime I am consistent with taking care of my physical health and attending to my mental health, it's night and day. It's fucking night and day. And also journaling. I have found that my anxiety gets so bad when I skip my journaling or I fall off on journaling. And I was like, oh, of course, because I'm literally taking all my stupid thoughts and putting them on paper so that they can't really live in my head anymore. We have all these studies about the connection between what you handwrite when you're thinking about things, like the sort of like mental, physical connection of that and how powerful it can be for manifestation and how healing it can be for releasing. And I have found journaling to be the most effective tool when it comes to my anxiety.
How has sort of your self-talk evolved over time as you've, you know, gone into therapy and matured as an artist and gone on meds and...
Yeah, I think the self-talk, well, today, right now, the self-talk is trying to be really compassionate and kind with myself. I mean, I still have the, you know, like, I think every night I'm like, oh my God, as I remember like a horrific memory from 3 years ago that doesn't matter that nobody else remembers. But anytime I find myself going like, oh, you fucking moron, or oh, you idiot, why would you, like, oh, I just go, okay, it's fine. Like, we are a human and like we forgive ourselves and we all do stupid things and now we know. So it's almost like a reparenting of myself, I think, in a way of like my inner child throwing a fit and then the adult observer coming in and be like, no, you don't talk like that. Something that I do with my friends when they have negative self-talk is I say, hey, stop being mean to my friend, which almost always gets a laugh because they're really able to see like, oh yeah, like why, like I'm your friend and I'm being mean to myself. So you're going to stick up for me in this moment. So now they've all started fucking parroting that shit back to me. And I'm always like, no, I get to be mean to myself. But so far the self-talk is it's trying and it's working on believing in myself. That's a big one. Believing in myself, believing that I'm worth being here and to not feel like an imposter.
Has your anxiety ever been like a superpower for you in your creative career?
My anxiety and my depression, I think, have masked themselves as superpowers in my career. There's a sort of saying in the stand-up community that like the happier you are, the less good of a comedian you are. Like, and so there's this aversion to happiness, aversion to self-work, aversion to growth, because you're worried that if you lose your pain, you're going to lose your sense of humor. We now know that's bullshit. That's not true. You could probably be way more creative if you're coming from like a regulated space where you can look at everything from a macro level. But I have definitely internalized, I did for a long, long time, that my anxiety, my depression, my pain, and my trauma were the driving force of my creative life. And it was only when a therapist really challenged that by pointing out like, You used to draw on your walls as a kid. You used to have like all these aspirations, all these dreams. I used to have like all-nighters where I loved drawing so much I could not sleep because I just had to draw. She was like, you didn't have like insane trauma then. You didn't have like, you weren't coming from a place of pain. You were coming from a place of joy. And she was like, I'd argue that any art you make from a place of joy is, even if it's about pain, especially if it's about pain, is going to be infinitely better than anything made in the depths of, you know, misery. I really took that to heart, and it really shed my illusions.
And that, everyone, was Anna Akana. It's incredible how Anna was able to eventually still find humor in life despite death. I hope these interviews and this show can be a way to help you, listener, see some of the same light. If you want more from Anna, check out her content online and her memoir, So Much I Want to Tell You, Letters to My Little Sister. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you subject yourself to it, and leave a 5-star review if you want unlimited Gilly points. Until next time, be kind to yourself.
His name is Gil, and he's mentally ill.
Mentally Gil is executive produced and hosted by me, Gil Kruger. Executive produced by Stuart-Pontier. Produced and edited by Melisa D. Monts and Diane Kang of Diamond MPrint Productions. Post-production sound by Chris Henry. Theme song and ad break music by Austin Archer. This has been a Best Regards Media production.